Welcome to OAA Now, your home for Oakland Activities Association news and information. Here's your host, Sammy Taormina.
Welcome to Special OAA Now. This is the group of death known as the Red Edition. Here I am, Sammy Taormina, blog around the OAA, host of Last Three Brain Cells, and the host Tweet Terminas on Orion. I'd like to welcome those watching on the local voice on SoundCloud, those watching on YouTube, and those watching on Orion Television. This is, of course, as we mentioned, this is the group of death known as the OAA Red, one of the toughest divisions in the state of Michigan. When you look at this division historically, all these teams have had state championships. All these teams have had deep postseason runs. And you look at last season, of course, Oxford projected to finish last in the division, end up winning the division last season. So, without further ado, let's start off with the team that made the deepest run in the postseason. That is the Highlanders of Rochester Adams. Adams last year had a lot of adversity. The injury to their star quarterback, Rylan Waters. And starting, of course, with Nolan Ferris. Nolan Ferris led Adams to the play, had a deep postseason run, getting to the state semifinals. So, what is there for an encore? Here's Adams coach Tony Petrito at the podium talking about the Highlanders.
Coach Byrne, it's for hosting. We appreciate that. I'm proud to be part of the OAA Red and proud to be associated with young men like this. To be successful in this league and in the state, we're trying to teach our kids about standard of play, how we approach the game, and an uncommon effort, an uncommon focus, and a sense of selflessness is what's required. There's a hell of a lot of talent in the room, but that doesn't win championships, and that's what we're trying to enforce here. I'm going to let these three young men introduce themselves real quick.
Ryan Waters, senior quarterback and linebacker.
Connor Eldridge, wide receiver, DB, senior.
Jesse Jottis, senior safety and wide receiver.
I also want to take a few minutes to welcome two of my best friends in the world into the league, Trevor Potts and Scott Merchant, two great men. I would want them to coach my kids. So welcome to the league. I think you're going to make it better. I want to wish everybody luck, have a great season, and stay healthy.
Adams this year, they do have their quarterback coming back in Rylan Waters. They do have a lot of proven players coming back as well. So I caught up with Coach Tony Petrino to talk about how Rylan's progress has been doing, and also talking about their Week 1 opponent, which is Romeo. I got Coach Afir the Veer, Coach Tony Petrino here. Coach, obviously, how's Rhino's process going?
He's doing great. His foot's healthy. His body's healthy. He played a whole baseball season, and he's really hungry to get back on the field and try to help our team win.
Talk about Romeo Week 1. I mean, that is just insane. Last year, you guys had a 14-0 lead. Romeo came back, tied, and took the lead. You guys opened up with them, so now you have them at home here. So talk about that matchup.
Well, we know traditionally they're a great program. They're well coached. Coach Renas is amazing, and we know a lot of those guys. And we know if we're not our best, they're going to beat us. So you want to have a great opponent Week 1 because it forces you to get ready as soon as possible. So we're excited to host, and hopefully we can sneak out a win.
What is the expectation this year, Coach?
Hopefully get better every day, be at our best by the end of the season, and also be competitive enough to try to get an OAA Red title. And that starts with being good enough to try to beat Romeo.
Thank you really much, Coach. I do have a podcast interview with Coach Petrito as well, also on the ONTV on the blog on the ONTV YouTube page, and also on the blog at Saginaw Bay 4650 at blogspot.com. So when you look at Adams, as I mentioned, Rylan Waters back is huge for this team. It is huge, obviously, but the big concerns is the lines up front. Obviously, in the Veer offense, you have to have a very good line. You have to, and obviously, when you run on a triple option offense like Adams does, line play, rushing attack is key to their success. Now, Rylan Waters, obviously, you look at his style of play, it reminds me a lot of Josh Allen of the Buffalo Bills. So when you look at the Highlanders' success, Waters is going to be the key to carrying them going forward. Even though they had Nolan Ferris last year, Nolan, of course, being at wide receiver, he could go and play quarterback at times as well. So when you look at the schedule for Rochester Adams, open up Week 1 at home against Romeo. You look at, of course, that game last year, Adams had a 14-0 lead. Romeo ended up answering against Coach Mike McFarland's defense. And they went overtime. Of course, Romeo scored, took 21-14 lead, and then Adams ended up scoring course, with Mark Petrino's offense. And then went for 2, ended up getting it, and won that one 22-21. So it'll be at Barnable Field last year. So it'll be a very interesting matchup at Rochester between the Bulldogs and the Highlanders. It always is. It should be a really good game between those two teams. Week 2, they host Rochester. Adams has had Rochester's number in the past. It's been since 1996 that the Highlanders have beaten Rochester. Of course, Rochester was the last time they won against Adams was 1996. So it'll be a really interesting matchup. It always is between two schools in the same school district. So it'll be very interesting to see how that one goes. Week 3, Adams heads to the Swamp to take on West Bloomfield. Excuse me. Obviously, last season, Adams beat West Bloomfield at home. Very tight game, very close game. Ryland Waters had a big game there. West Bloomfield, we know, is going to be a very tough matchup. It always is over in the Swamp, so it should be a really fun matchup between those two teams. Week 4, Oxford goes to Adams to take on the Highlanders. As I mentioned, Adams lost to Oxford last year. That was after the game where that was pre-Ryland Waters, of course. Ferris started that game. So it was a tight game, a low-scoring game. Oxford's defense really held in that one, shutting down a really good Adams offense. So it'll be interesting there in that one. And then September 26th, Adams goes to Clarkson to take on the Wolves. And we know the last 2 meetings last year, Adams beat Clarkson twice by a combined 69-10, including last season's 41-0 shellacking of the Wolves in the playoffs in the district finals. So it'll be an interesting matchup. I'll be curious to see how Clarkson's defense adjusts going up against Ryland Waters. So it'll be really interesting there. Week number 6, they take on Stony Creek at Stony Creek. Difficult matchup, obviously. Stony Creek's got a lot of experience. But Adams beat Stony Creek twice last year, including once in the playoffs. So that should be a really interesting one. Week 7, they host Lake Orion. Again, last year, this was a game that Ryland Waters went out when he got hurt. And Lake Orion ended up winning that game. It was a really, really tight game. So it should be a really good game between the Highlanders and the Dragons. It always has been between the two teams. Really tight games. And the coaching match between Coach Petrino and Coach Bell will be very interesting there. Week number 8, they take on the Maples of Birmingham Seaholm. Obviously, both these two teams run the Veer offense, obviously. So it should be a really interesting matchup of both styles, similar styles. Both these teams like to run. And then week 9, they host New Baltimore Anchor Bay. Of course, last season, Adams kept the Tars from making the playoffs last year, winning in New Baltimore last season. The Tars got a new coach. They got a new scheme, new system. So it'll be really interesting to see how that matchup will go. So when you look at Adams this year, fear the Veer, obviously. The Veer offense, the triple option offense, they got it all. So Adams, to me, this is a team with Waters back. It looks like this is a team that can make some noise this year again. Now, the line is a bit of a concern to keep an eye on with them. But you know Coach Petrino, he'll find somebody to play on that offensive line, also on that defensive line. They're well coached. It's a proven program with proven state championship experience. Adams, to me, they are one of those top teams to keep an eye on. They're legit. They're very, very good this year. So Adams, keep an eye on them this year. They're going to make some noise this year. Now let's go from the Highlanders to the Wolves of Clarkston. When you look at Clarkston, they got a lot of pieces back to make a deep run. So here's Clarkston coach Justin Pintar at the podium talking about the Wolves.
All right. First off, I'd just like to say thank you to Coach Vernon and Rochester for putting on this event. Again, great opportunity for our guys in this league to, just kind of show what it's about and the kind of talent that we have in this conference. So I'm going to have my captains here introduce themselves.
My name is Hayden Flavin. I'm a senior O-lineman.
My name is Zach Bradley, and I'm a senior O-line. Bodie Santamore, senior O-lineman.
Alex Yashenko, junior quarterback.
So, as a lot of guys have already talked about, this league is year in and year out is one of the best in the state. We've had multiple state championships. The OAA Red in particular is a gauntlet week in and week out. I think if we go back over the last 3 or 4 years, I think every team has won the league at some point over that time. Which just shows you the competitive balance. So we're looking forward to getting back out there. We had a good year last year, but we're looking to kind of exceed what we did last season. We got a good group of kids coming back. We got about half of our starters on both sides of the ball, and we got a bunch of guys that are hungry to get out there and play and kind of get over a bad taste in our mouth after our last game last year. So we're looking forward to this season. Good luck to everybody. Thank you.
I noticed with the Wolves, the Bowman twins were not there at Media Day, which is shocking. So the Bowman twins are going to be the 2 key guys for Clarkson this year. Both of them are running backs. Of course, we know they can also play defense as well. So when I look at Clarkson this year, there are some big-time strengths, but also some big-time warning signs. So I caught up with Coach Justin Pintar talking about the Wolves' outlook heading into the season. I got the coach of the Wolves, Coach Justin Pintar here. Coach, looking at last season, obviously you got a lot of people on offense coming back, but how's that defense looking?
We're excited about our defense. So we got a little bit of we're gonna have some new faces up front, but the back half of the secondary and our linebackers especially are going to be guys that are all returners. So we'll have 4 guys that are kind of overhang linebacker positions. And that played a lot for us last year and should be kind of key pieces of this team. And then our secondary will replace a couple guys, but we really like the talent that we have there and feel good about our skill positions on both sides of the ball, really.
Talk about that schedule. You open up week 1 with Belleville at Wayne State, then talk about having to play the Tigers week 1.
Yeah, so again, another really talented football team. Obviously, Bryce Underwood last year was a difference maker, but they reload and they still have a bunch of guys that are Division I type guys. So we're looking forward to it. It should be a great test, and we like having a week 1 that's going to get us ready for the OAA Red schedule, and we're looking forward to seeing where we're at right away week 1.
What is your expectations here, Coach?
Yeah, our expectations are always the same. So we talk to the guys about we want to go out there and we want to compete for an OAA Red title. And we know that if you can win the OAA Red, then you have a great shot at going far in the playoffs. If you go back, last year I don't think we had anybody, but 2 years ago you had Southfield and Harper Woods from this league go win state titles. And obviously many other teams from this league have gone and won state titles over the last 20 years or so. So we feel good about this team. If we can go out and win an OAA Red championship, we think that puts us in a great spot. So we want to go out and do that, and then after that, it's on to the playoffs, and hopefully we can go win the districts and win a regional and get back to Ford Field. So those are always our goals: is to win the league, win a district, win a regional, and then get to Ford Field and hopefully compete for a state championship.
Thank you very much, Coach.
Thank you.
When you look at the Wolves' outlook this year, they do return the quarterback in Alex Wachensko. They got the Bowman twins. Very curious to see their wide receiving core, obviously. As I mentioned, my biggest warning sign for Clarkson is going to be that defense. That defense, had some moments where they just did not look very good. And especially against teams that had running quarterbacks where they had a lot of trouble with last season. So when you look at Clarkson's schedule this year, I also forgot to mention we also had the podcast with Coach Justin Pintar as well. You can take a look at that on the Orion Neighborhood Television YouTube page and also on the blog at Saginaw4650 at blogspot.com. So when you look at the Wolves' schedule, opening up the year at Wayne State against Belleville. Last season, of course, was a instant classic between the Wolves and the Tigers. Of course, Bryce Underwood basically had to save the Tigers from their chinny chin chins last year against Clarkson. Obviously, when you look at what Clarkson did, coming back from 2 touchdowns down, tying up the score, only have Bryce Underwood basically save them. I mean, you look at that game last year, I kind of felt like in that second half, Clarkson was the better team in that game. But I just really look at with them. Belleville's got a new quarterback. They're going to have a new Basically, it's going to be interesting to see what the Tigers have. We know how good Clarkson is, and, it's going to be an interesting matchup to see how Belleville looks post Bryce Underwood. And it's going to be interesting to see how that one goes. It should be a really good game. But, you look at this year, this could be Clarkson's time maybe to get him back. And I think they got a great chance to get him back this year, especially now that Underwood's no longer there. They still got athletes. But it'll be a test, I think, for Clarkson's defense against Belleville. It always is when you're playing against them. Week 2, they host Harper Woods. Of course, 2 years ago, Harper Woods went into Clarkston and just destroyed them. It was not a pretty sight. I mean, you look at that game 2 years ago, it was not pretty for Clarkston. And yeah, Clarkston was a young team, don't get me wrong, but still, very un-Clarkston-like, especially at least at home, especially, when you look at a team like Harper Woods, we know they're very good. It's going to be a test for them. Obviously, Harper Woods got a lot of experience, but Harper Woods tend to struggle a little bit when they go north. I particularly look at Harper Woods when they go north of M24 and Silverville Road. Now, Clarkson's not technically north of M24 and Silverville Road, but you get the memo. So, so it'll be a good game, I think, between the Pioneers and Wolves. It should be a really, really good game there. Week 3, Clarkson heads to Oxford to take on the Wildcats. And this is going to be very interesting because Oxford and Clarkson have had some games where they've had some battles. And they've had some, and last year it was a tight game. Clarkson ended up winning that one. So I think it'll be really interesting to see how that one goes, especially in the quarterback matchup between Jack Hendricks and, of course, Alex Wachensko. I think the Bowman twins might be the key in that matchup, and especially the line up front. Clarkson's line, we know when you look at players like Hayden Flavin, Bodie St. Omer, Zach Reddick, very, very good up front. Even though there's some questions, though, I have some concerns with them up front, considering, last season there were some times they did not look very good last season. But, I think Clarkston, it should be interesting to see how they do against Oxford in Week 3. Week 4, they take on Troy. It's a tough matchup for Troy. That game's going to be at Troy, so it'll be interesting to see how that one goes there with those two. But I just think Clarkson, with the experience they got, be too much for them, I think. Week number 5, they take on Adams at Clarkston. Clarkson's going to have this game circled because, as I mentioned, 69-10. That was the score the last 2 years Adams and Clarkson played. Obviously, last year was 41-0 in the playoffs. So it should be an interesting game. Be curious to see how the Wolves defense handles Ryland Waters, how they play him. It'll be really interesting. Week 6, they take on arch rival Lake Orion. Clarkston and Lake Orion have had some battles in the past. Usually, in this rivalry, the history is usually last 2 years, Lake Orion's won the regular season meeting, but then in the playoffs, Clarkson won the last 2 meetings in the playoffs. I know it's been happening in the past where Clarkson's won the regular season and then Lake Orion's won the postseason meeting. I do remember a couple times, I think twice it's happened. Clarkson's beaten Lake Orion twice. I think in 13 and 19, 13 and 18. And then, of course, Lake Orion beat Clarkson twice in 2005. Of course, that was my senior year of high school. I still hold that very proudly. So, Lake Orion, Clarkston, we know there's a trophy game on there. It should be a very interesting matchup between those two teams. I know in the JV game a couple years ago, it was an 8-7 game for Lake Orion winning that one. So it should be a really interesting game at Clarkston between the two rivals. Week 7, they take on the Lakers of West Bloomfield. And, excuse me, that game is in the Swamp. And West Bloomfield and Clarkston, they've had some battles in the past. Obviously, Clarkston's won the last 2 years against West Bloomfield. So it'll be very interesting to see how that matchup is in the Swamp. I think it's going to be a very interesting game between those two. It always has been between those two rivals. Week 8, they take on Farmington. As I said, Clarkson, obviously, they got an edge there in that matchup with Farmington. It'll be very interesting to see how that one goes. Week 9, they close out the year. I think that game's at Swinehart with Utica Eisenhower. Clarkson last year, very impressive against the Eagles, knocking them off pretty handily. And that was surprising with what Clarkson did to Utica Eisenhower last season. So now you look at that matchup, that game's at Swinehart. So it'll be interesting to see with Clarkson this year. I think they're more than capable of having a deep run. But as I said with this team, the defense is the biggest concern that I have with Clarkson. So when you look at, of course, last season, Clarkson had the 4th best when it came to points allowed in defense when you look at this team. So Clarkson, when I look at them offensively, they're going to score a bunch. They're going to score a bunch of points this year. They scored a lot of points. It's the other side of the ball that I'm concerned about when you look at the Wolves this year. I know the coaches have said that they're very optimistic with this defense. I'm not so sure when you look at this defense because they give up they've given up a ton of points in the past. And, when you look at the past, you know what I mean? When you look at the past, you know what I mean? You think about, like, some things that, you look at with Clarkson. Defensively, this team, I've got some concerns. Offensively, they could be in for a monster year. So, Clarkson, when I look at the Wolves this year, they're going to be in that playoff conversation. They're going to be in the mix this year to contend. They're ranked high in the state to start the year, obviously because of the Twins. But, and obviously, they're going to be as good as the Twins take them. So we'll see what happens with them this upcoming season. Now we go from Clarkson to Lake Orion. When you look at the Dragons this year, last 2 years, this team's had talent, but have ran into Clarkson in the playoffs. So when you look at this team coming into the year, Lake Orion, there are some question marks with the Dragons. So here is Dragon coach Chris Bell at the podium talking about the outlook of the Dragons.
Again, thank you, Rochester. Thank you, Coach Vernon and Dean. Thank you for doing a great job. I'm Chris Bell, I'm the head football coach at Lake Orion. I'm also the athletic director at Lake Orion. I want to put my athletic director hat on just for a second and echo what Bob Check said to you guys. And I'm going to put it in better terms for you as well. A lot of you guys are seniors. You're going to go on to college next year. And we can think back, all of us coaches, when we were at college, it would have been nice to have some extra spending money during the week. If you can start out officiating, let's say you do middle school and sub-varsity games. I don't care the sport. Per game, you're going to make probably about $65 a game. You do that 2-3 times a week. All right, you're out there, in athletics, the sport that you love, the sport that you know. All right, and you can get started some great spending money. So please think about that, because from the AD side, I can tell you, we need officials in all sports. And I would love to have you. And our best officials come from former players, so please think about that. All right, with me today are 3 of my captains, starting out with number 88, tight end, outside linebacker, and Western Michigan commit, Ryan Rushello. Number 4, one of our quarterbacks. He's also can play receiver and defensive back, Brody Thompson. And number 35, inside linebacker, running back, Alex Hensley. If I was going to think about our team coming back, the word that comes to mind for me is unproven. We graduated a big senior class. We returned 4 starters on each side of the ball. But, like all coaches, if the way that they attack the off-season in the summer is any indication, I'm really excited about these guys. These guys are excited to write their own story, make a name for themselves. Going through the summer, some of the old-timers, I tell you, they remind me of some of our past Orion tough teams that we've had in the past. We're going to be big and strong up front, be physical on both sides. Our guys have the tools, we have some speed, and most importantly, they have the hunger. We're excited for the season ahead of us. So, wish everyone the best of luck. When you're not playing us, we cheer for you. Have a great season. Stay healthy. Go Dragons.
When you look at Lake Orion, when you look at this team, the quarterback system, the quarterbacks is my biggest question mark with this team. There's other question marks I have with Lake Orion as well. As Coach Bell mentioned, this is a very unproven team. And you really look at it, there's some concerns in the secondary. There's some concerns, a lot of concerns elsewhere. Is it the mental mindset? the psyche. I mean, there's just so many questions when I look at Lake Orion. So I caught up with Coach Bell to talk about the state of the Dragons. Okay, I got the coach of the Dragons, Coach Chris Bell here. Coach, coming into the year, you got some questions at quarterback. So talk about how that quarterback situation's been going.
I don't know if we necessarily have questions. We've got two really good ones. Brody Thompson has played well for us, and he's been in there. And then we have Anderson Adams coming. So we got two great options, and it may be a combination of both of them. So they both do some things well. We can win with both of them. We're going to let those guys battle it out in camp. We look at it as it's a blessing and a curse. You got two great ones, and it's also hard because sometimes you got to pick one. And they're both great kids, great leaders, and so we're going to be in good shape with either one.
Talk about that schedule. Vicious. You got Northville week 1, and then you got the non-conference Oak Park, Saline in there. So talk about, and then Rochester as well. So talk about that non-conference.
Non-conference schedule obviously bookended with Northville and Saline, two very good teams. Rochester, is always tough. Stony Creek is going to be much better than they were last year. And Oak Park, probably not a better coach in the league than Greg Carter. So no breaks whatsoever. And then you throw in that gauntlet of the league schedule. It's a typical Lake Orion schedule.
What is your expectation this year, Coach?
You know what? I want us to be as good as we can be. The kids are working hard. They're hungry. They're great kids. They're going to have some success. I just want us to, at the end of the season, to say that we maximize our talent. We got everything out of our ability. We're going to be in every game. How many are we going to win? I don't know. It's because the league is so balanced. But these are great kids going to play hard. It means everything to them. They've worked hard, so we're really excited.
Thank you very much, Coach. When you look at the Dragons, obviously they do have a lot of that 2005 mentality. Of course, that was on that team in 05 when we had our when we went 7-2, and of course we knocked off Clarkson twice in 1 year. They have that worksman-like mentality. When you look at this team, from a mental mindset, I don't know, but they could surprise some people, and I think Lake Orion could be a very dangerous team. They're right where they want to be. When you look at this Dragon team, when you look at that schedule, it is vicious. When you look at opening up week 1 at Wayne State against Northville, Lake Orion, of course, won last season against the Mustangs in a crazy game. I think it was 21-14. You got to look at that matchup, and it's going to be an interesting game. I mean, like Lake Orion, typically at Wayne State, has struggled at Wayne State. I know when they played Chippewa Valley a couple times there, they lost both meetings. I think they're 0-3 at Wayne State. So that's going to be something for them to overcome, and I think that's going to be a challenge. Northville's got a lot of experience coming back. They got the quarterback back. They got a very good defense coming back. So it's going to be a very daunting task week 1 for them. Week 2, they take on Stony Creek, and that's a difficult matchup. Of course, Rick Powell, their former Lake Orion defensive coordinator, is the head coach at Stony Creek. They got a lot of experience coming back. So it'll be a daunting task. Week 3, they take on Rochester on September the 12th. Rochester, it's a Falcon Frenzy game. Rochester's got a lot of experience coming back. So that's another interesting matchup. Week 4, West Bloomfield at Dragon Stadium. We know 2 years ago was a classic. Last year in the Swamp, it was 49-41 in favor of West Bloomfield over Lake Orion in a high-scoring game. So that'll be a very interesting matchup at Dragon Stadium. It always has been between Lake Orion and West Bloomfield. Usually a lot of high-scoring games between the two teams. Week 5, they take on the Wildcats of Oxford, the Double-O Trophy game. Last season, Oxford beat Lake Orion 24-21. Of course, it didn't help that Lake Orion gave Oxford a 21-3 lead during the first half. But Lake Orion fought back and got it. Actually, it was 21-18. My bad, was that score. But a lot of Dragon fans are looking forward to that one, motivated for that game. Should be a really interesting game at Dragon Stadium. Week 6, they take on their other rival, the Clarkson Wolves. Of course, Clarkson won the playoff game last year against Lake Orion, 34-16. A lot of people look at that game, and you look at that Griffin Bowman touchdown to close out the first half, being that slam in the coffin last season. in that game. Lake Orion won the regular season meeting against Clarkston in a classic. So, but a lot of people look at that game against Clarkston, and you look at that Bowman touchdown being that big difference in that game, being that dagger. So it'll be an interesting matchup there. Week number 7, they go to Rochester Adams, take on the Highlanders. Of course, Lake Orion won that game last year at home. It was a big 28-25. It was a big win for them at the time. Now they go to Adams. Obviously, they've had some success at Adams in the past. Be very interesting. I think that line matchup's looking to be very, very interesting between those two teams. Week number 8, they host the Knights of Oak Park. It's Lake Orion's homecoming. Obviously, you look at Oak Park, they got experience. They're loaded with proven experience. They got a 3-year starting quarterback, 3-year running back, 3-year wide receiver. They got a very good offensive lineman in William Reed. So it'll be really interesting. And then week number 9, they take on the Hornets of Saline. Obviously, last year was 8-7. It was an 8-7 game for the Hornets, scoring that long touchdown from the Georgia commit Lincoln Keys. So it's going to be really interesting to see where this Lake Orion team is going to be like at this year. They got this is a very unproven team. So, there's not a lot of household names to know about. I mean, this is a hardworking team. And if they have that type of team, that makes you a very dangerous team. And I think Lake Orion's more than capable of having a really dangerous team this season. They're more that team that's under the radar. And I think, that's a good thing if you're a Dragons fan. Usually when you're an under the radar team, you tend to surprise some people and have monster years. So, and I think Lake Orion's more than capable of having that this year. If you want to catch Lake Orion, obviously, Orion Neighborhood Television is going to have coverage of Dragon football. Also, you can take a look at the Lake Orion Football Preview show that was hosted by my brother, Anthony Taormina. It is on the Orion Neighborhood Television YouTube page. If you want to see more about Lake Orion Dragons football, I recommend you watch that Lake Orion Football Preview show. It is on YouTube on the Orion Neighborhood Television YouTube page. So let's go from Lake Orion to arch rival Oxford. When you look at the Wildcats last year, picked to finish last in the division last year, ended up winning the division. Went and shocked Davison last year in the first round before falling the Grand Blanc. Some big changes at Oxford. Of course, Coach Zach Line no longer at Oxford. He ended up being a special teams assistant with the Denver Broncos and former Saints coach Sean Payton. So here is Oxford's new coach, who is formerly the defensive coordinator at Oxford, Trevor Potts, at the podium talking about the Wildcats.
Good afternoon. My name is Trevor Potts. I'm the new head coach at Oxford High School. Just excited to be here today in front of a room full of coaches that I would consider mentors and friends. I'm most proud of representing these young men and want to give you a chance to meet each of them, and then I'll give you a little bit about where we've been and where we're headed.
My name is AJ Krupa. I'm a senior linebacker tight end.
My name is Brady Breeze. I play DN and fullback. My name is Jack Hendricks. I'm a senior quarterback.
My name is Colin Crosby. I'm a senior. I play running back corner.
My name is James Andrewski. I'm a junior and I play left tackle.
So these four seniors and one junior are a good representation of a large group of guys that have worked really hard over the last several months to get better. Last year was our first league title, OAA Red title in school history. We fell short of a lot of our goals last year, but we learned a lot as a group. For the 2025 season, we've made it a mission to fall in love with the process of improving daily. Our guys have talked and lived into being honorable and honoring the people of Oxford, and we're just excited to represent them as we move into this season. Thank you to Coach Vernon and Rochester High for giving us an opportunity and for the media to give exposure to these great young men. Thanks for having us.
When you look at Oxford, you always got to think about who's going to be wearing that special 42 number this year. Obviously, 42 has been worn by the greats of Oxford football when you look at players like Prescott Line, Zach Line, and also the great Tate Muir. So when you look at the Wildcats this year as an outlook, You look at, of course, Liam Kenya being that star linebacker for Oxford, but everything starts and ends with Jack Hendricks, the quarterback. And they do have a proven player in Seth Tabor and also Brady Haspring to watch out for as well. So I caught up with Coach Potts to talk about the state of the Wildcats. I got the new coach of the Cats, Coach Trevor Potts here. Coach, how has the transition been from Coach Line to you been going for you guys?
I think it's been a good transition. We've had the opportunity to take on new roles and responsibilities as a staff, but more importantly, just keep the continuity of our kids and our program and how we train and who we are as Wildcats.
Talk about that schedule. It is brutal. I mean, like week 1 against Heartland, and then with not mentioning the Red, but then we got week 9 against Macomb, Dakota. So talk about that murder's roll with schedule you guys got.
Yeah, I think, it's always been our philosophy at Oxford to play whoever, whenever. I think in order to compete in the Division I playoffs, you have to play those teams throughout your year. And we're just looking to compete week by week and improve each week and hopefully have a long playoff run.
What is your expectation this year, Coach?
Just get better. It's as simple as that. We have 12 practice before we start talking about Heartland, and then go out week 1 against Heartland and give it our best shot, and then improve week by week.
Thank you very much, Coach.
Appreciate it.
When you look at the Wildcats, obviously the biggest concerns I have with this team's going to be up front. And also they lost a lot of talent last season. When you look at Oxford, that's where they got to address. Obviously the JV team had a nice year last year, but making that transition to JV to varsity, it's a different animal. So when you look at Oxford, the biggest concern is they're replacing a lot of guys, and that's not easy to do. So when you look at the schedule, and I also have the podcast of Oxford football with Coach Trevor Potts on the ONTV YouTube page, and also on my blog at SaginawBay4650 at blogspot.com. So when you look at Oxford's schedule, it is brutal. I mean, they open up the year with Heartland. Heartland's an improving team in the KLAA and the Kensington Lakes Athletic Association. Heartland, of course, we know it's got a very good lineman coming back, but they got a lot to prove as well. I mean, Heartland's been one of those teams in the KLA West that is, obviously trying to make some noise. They're in a tough conference. They got Heartland's in there. You got Howell in there. You got Novi, Northville, Brighton's in there. I mean, that's not an easy conference, the KLA West. It's not an easy conference. But, you look at the OA Red, it's a brutal conference. And, you look at Oxford, week 1 against Heartland. I think it's a winnable game for them. I think they're going to do some damage. And it's at home for them. That's big. And I think it's going to be really, really interesting to see how Oxford plays that game. Of course, it's some Coach Potts coaching debut, taking on a very good Heartland team week 1. Week 2, they go to Beverly Hills to take on Groves. This would be an interesting matchup. As I mentioned, I'm curious to see the matchup up front with Oxford's line going against Groves' line. I think they got an edge at quarterback. I think playmakers, they got to give an edge to Oxford here in this matchup. So that'll be a really interesting matchup week 2 in Beverly Hills. Week 3, they host Clarkston. And you look at that matchup, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how the Wildcats match up against an experienced Wolves offense. Defensively, I think that's going to be very interesting to see how that one goes. So it's going to be an interesting game over there between the Wolves and the Wildcats. It always has been in the past. So it'll be really interesting there. Week 4, they host Adams. And that's a big one because, obviously Coach Potts learned from Coach Tony Petrino when he was at Adams, and I know both staffs know each other quite well. So it should be an interesting matchup in Rochester between those two teams. It always is when Oxford plays Adams. So we'll see how that one goes. And then week 5, the Double O Trophy game, Oxford goes to Lake Orion to take on the Dragons. So that one, Oxford last year won 21-18. Oxford got out to a really good start. Obviously relied a lot on Luke Johnson in that game. So that should be a really interesting matchup. It always has been between Lake Orion and Oxford, and I expect it to be again this season. Week number 6, West Bloomfield comes to the Blue Turf to take on Oxford, and that should be an interesting game right there. Obviously, Oxford went in the swamp last year and won that one. Now, they're going to be a completely different team, so it'll be interesting to see how that one goes with them. And then, of course, Oxford's league play is over after week 7. They take on the Red Hawks of Troy Athens. I think that's a winnable game for Oxford. Obviously, they're going to have to deal with Nathan Piggott. And Athens got an experienced team, so that should be a really interesting matchup between those two teams. And then in week 8, they take on North Farmington. Of course, North Farmington comes up to Oxford to take on the Wildcats. Curious to the matchup between Coach John Herstein and Coach Potts. So that should be really interesting. And then week 9, oh boy, you got to go to Macomb, Dakota. Last season, Macomb, Dakota went to Oxford, and it was not funny. It was not a fun matchup for the Cats last year. Getting hammered by Macomb, Dakota, I think it was 28-0. Oxford fought in that game, but, Dakota, too much experience, too much depth. It was a challenge for them. So when you look at Oxford this season, that schedule, vicious, very brutal. I know the good folks at Oxford Community Television are going to have a lot of coverage of Wildcat football this year, and I know it's going to be very interesting to see how Oxford does this upcoming season. So Oxford, they're going to take they got some talent. They got Jack Hendricks coming back. They got some proven players, but there's a lot of question marks with Oxford as well heading into the year. And now let's look at our final team here in the Red Division. This is the Lakers of West Bloomfield. Last season was very unusual for West Bloomfield. Under 500. They had some struggles. They had a 2-quarterback system. Really unusual with West Bloomfield. So here is Coach Zach Hilbers at the podium talking about the Lakers.
First of all, like a lot of people said, thank you to Rochester High School and the people that came out today to check this awesome event out. I know when you get to the end of the program with us, alphabetically, you're kind of sick of hearing people probably talk and say the same old stuff, but you're going to have to bear with me because these guys will tell you I'm a little long-winded. And, usually I kind of wander too, but Orion TV is keeping me attached to this podium, so I'll try my best. Sorry in advance. But, guys, to be honest, we're super excited. You get to this point of the year, especially the end of this day, we're right around the corner. All the stuff that you've been, working for and lifting weights and conditioning for, it's right there in front of you. You know what I mean? And with me here, I got 3 seniors that they've kind of been through the gauntlet with us. These guys and a couple other have played a ton of football for us since they were sophomores. Okay, on my far right, I have Jeremiah Benson, who will play on the D-line, and he'll play some tight end, and Kamari Pittman, who's played on the D-line, and he'll play some H-back, and Travis Robertson here, who will play on the O-line and D-line. And these guys played a lot as sophomores in the state semifinal game, and were a play away against Southfield from kind of reaching their ultimate goal. And then the next year, last year, we were toe-to-toe with so many quality opponents on our schedule in a lot of different games. And honestly, more often than not, it didn't go our way. So they kind of had a taste of that success when they were younger. And then last year kind of got put through the ringer that can be the grind of the OAA schedule that a lot of people have mentioned. And they've kind of seen both sides of it. And I think it's left them with a great balance of the appreciation it takes to get close to your ultimate goal, but also the understanding that it takes of how hard it is just to get there. Winning is difficult. It's really difficult. If it wasn't, everybody would win every week. Especially if you look at some of the schedules in this packet, it is very difficult. And I think we got a pretty good understanding of that and what it takes to at least give yourself a chance to get out there and compete, put your best product on the field, and give yourself a chance to win each week. And that's our ultimate goal. All our off-season training, all our summer has been to get in there, get stronger, get ready for the gauntlet that's about to happen starting next week. And to be honest, guys, my closing message, I guess, because we're last to everybody in this room, is there's a lot of good coaches here, guys, but the players across this board, from my left to my right, you guys are what makes this league special, okay? And it's not kids in the hallways of your school. It's not kids in your classroom or your cafeteria. It's us here in this room. We are the only ones, and your teammates, that understand the sacrifices that we all make to try to reach our goals. right? So along with that, it's my goal is to continue to support each other and lift this game up. And yeah, it's a weird balance because a lot of us, we're going to compete against each other. And it's a physical game that you want to like beat each other's face in within the rules and push people around. But at the same time, lift each other up. Because the people that understand the stuff that you guys sacrifice to try to reach your goals, they're all here. And yeah, we might practice differently, we might lift differently, we might condition differently, but we all have the same goals for each other. You have the same goals for each other, you have the same goals for your teammates, and we all want the same thing at the end of the day. And it's not going to happen for each of us, but man, I know that like at least like the teams that we're going to play, we're all going to try, right? So embrace each other, lift each other up, and keep advancing this game so we continue as a conference to reach greater and greater heights each year. Thank you guys, appreciate it, have a good one.
When you look at the Lakers, I noticed a player that wasn't there was Jamal Shakespeare. Of course, Shakespeare is a gifted athlete for the Lakers. He plays everywhere for this group, almost similar to that of Terrence James in North Farmington. He can play quarterback, he can play wide receiver, he can play running back, he can play anywhere. And also on the defensive side for Coach Zach Hilbers. They do have another quarterback in Jackson Carver, who a lot of people are excited about heading into the year. But there are some question marks for West Bloomfield. So I did talk to Coach Zach Hilbers about addressing those questions. Yep. I got the coach of the Lakers, Coach Zach Hilbers here. Coach, last season, had a game of inches, and sort of like the movie The Game of Thrones. I mean, so talk about the grind of last season and almost like that movie, The Game of Thrones.
The schedule's always going to be tough. It's not unique to us. It's anybody in the OAA Red with who we play in the league and the crossovers and whatnot. And we thought we competed with a lot of teams. We just didn't come out on the right end of a lot of those games. And unfortunately, this is a results business, and we all deeply care about the process of, becoming better people, better players, and better individuals. But we want those results just like anybody else does. So our main focus now is, competing, but also ending up on the other side of those.
Talk about Jamal. I mean, obviously, Jamal Shakespeare, obviously, you're all-around utility player, I call him. If you play a fantasy baseball league, he's like a utility guy. So talk about the combination of Jackson Carver and Jamal Shakespeare. We did talk about this on the podcast a couple months ago.
No, yeah, you actually kind of nailed it right there. We've always kind of had those utility guys that we try to play as many places as we can on the field. Jamal is the guy that would probably best fit that right now, but it's not too different than what Dylan Tatum did for us and what Donovan Edwards did for us. And if you go back to Lorenzo White, my first year in 2007, he did the same type of stuff for us. And it's really about getting your best football players in as many positions as possible, really for their success and for the team's success. So, Jamal's one of those guys who he'll play quarterback, he'll play running back, he'll play receiver, he'll play strong safety. He might play some nickel and free safety as well, because he's a really good football player. And, we try to get him out there as much as we can.
What are your expectations here, Coach?
Just to compete, it's a grind of a schedule. We know what it is. We know the challenges that are ahead of us and the quality of players and coaches that we're going to face each week. And we know if we just focus on ourselves and compete every single week, we're going to give ourselves a chance. And I think our senior class, they're hungry for the chance to kind of prove themselves in those close moments.
Thank you really much, Coach.
You got it. Thanks, buddy.
Yep. Now I can get it. If you want to look at the West Bloomfield podcast, it's on my blog at saginaw4650 at blogspot.com. Also on the Orion Neighborhood Television YouTube page. When you look at the Lakers, obviously my biggest concerns is obviously if Shakespeare has to play quarterback, that's a warning sign for me because that takes away a different position, obviously. Also some players, also on the offensive line, defensive line. Lack of depth there. That's another concern I have with West Bloomfield. So there is a lot, and also in their defensive secondary, they're very, very good as well. So forgot to mention that. Their defensive secondary, really talented up on that defensive secondary. Someone could play wide receiver as well. But as I mentioned, the concerns I have is if Shakespeare has to play quarterback and also the offensive and defensive line on the depth there, especially when you look at West Bloomfield. So a lot of concerns. And I even addressed that on Civic Center TV with Tyler Keith, my biggest concerns surrounding West Bloomfield. So here is the schedule for the Lakers. Opening up this year, week 1, against Dearborn Fordson. Fordson's got a new coach, new system. So it's going to be an interesting challenge for West Bloomfield to see what type of scheme that Fordson's going to run. Obviously, with Coach Walter Zabin retiring, they got a new coach in there. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how West Bloomfield, especially when they're playing a team like Tractors week 1, can they figure it out quickly against a new team, a new staff? Not a lot of film to prepare for. So it'll be really interesting to see how Coach Jack Hilbert plays that and how the Lakers respond to that week 1. Week 2, they take on the Warriors of Southfield A&T. This is a team that West Bloomfield's owned in the past. It's a rivalry. It's a close rivalry. Really short travel for West Bloomfield and Southfield. It should be a very interesting game. I think this year's game is going to be in Southfield, so I'm not sure of that, but we'll see how that one goes. West Bloomfield did beat Southfield A&T last year pretty handily, so that should be really interesting there in that one. Week 3, West Bloomfield, they have Adams coming to the Swamp, and that's going to be really interesting because, last year Adams beat West Bloomfield in a very good classic. It should be a very interesting matchup between those two teams. Week 4, West Bloomfield travels to Lake Orion to take on the Dragons. These two teams have had some classics lately. High-scoring games. I remember that 2019 game where that was just absolutely crazy. That went 4 overtime game. That was nuts. And then, of course, 2 years ago, Lake Orion ended up winning against West Bloomfield. And then last season, the Lakers got the Dragons back in the Swamp, winning that one 49-41 in a shootout, basically, between those two teams. Week number 5, they take on Groves. And, that's always been a battle between the Lakers and the Falcons. We know the coaching matchup between Coach Hilberts and Coach Flaherty. That should be really interesting there. Week number 6, Tyler Keith at Civic Center TV calls this the Big Blue Trap game. And West Bloomfield's got to go to Oxford to take on the Wildcats. That's not an easy game for West Bloomfield at all. So that'll be really interesting there. And then week 7, West Bloomfield will have Clarkson coming to the Swamp. So that'll be really, really interesting there. Obviously, Clarkson's won the last 2 meetings against West Bloomfield, but usually when Clarkson goes to West Bloomfield, it's been the other way around. So, West Bloomfield, it should be a really good matchup between those two teams. Week number 8, excuse me, is the Battle of Bloomfield. West Bloomfield taking on Bloomfield Hills at Bloomfield Hills. Obviously, Scott Merchant there changes the complete mindset of that rivalry. Be curious to see when it comes to talent how that one's going to look. That could be a really interesting game, but it's a tough matchup for Bloomfield Hills, especially for them having to take on a red opponent like West Bloomfield. And then week 9, West Bloomfield has Roseville coming to the Swamp. Last year, the Panthers won that game over the Lakers in overtime, 49-48. So I know a lot of Laker fans haven't forgotten that game. Roseville, of course, is one of those top teams in the MAC. So when you look at the Lakers this year, this is a team that I think could surprise some people, but they got a tough schedule. You can catch the Lakers on Civic Center TV. My good friend Tyler Keith does a really good job. Does a podcast, does a podcast, and also does some shows surrounding West Bloomfield, Laker Nation. So you look at West Bloomfield, this could be really interesting for them. It's going to be really interesting to see how this one goes. So when you look at the projections, and I just was so hard to do this. It was really hard to figure it out, to put everything together. Usually, last season, the team in the division, last year Oxford won it, having a 3-1 record. Everybody else was 2-2, and West Bloomfield was 1-3 last year. So I guarantee you the record's going to change. So these are my best guesses right now early on. I think when I look at Adams, and you can see why everybody is highlighted in red. And I think that means, you pretty much know what that means. I think all 5 teams are going to make the playoffs. I think all 5 are going to do it again this year like they did last year. So when I look at Adams, the reason why I have them where they're at right now is because of Rylan Waters. I think they're going to get that line thing figured out. When I look at Clarkston, yes, I got them at 8-1. I still got concerns about that defense. Their defense does worry me when I look at this Wolves team. Lake Orion, I had them at 6-3. When I look at this Dragon team, they remind me a lot of the 05 team, the team I was on. The only question I have with them is the mental mindset. And also, that's the biggest concern I have with Lake Orion. They don't really have a lot of weaknesses, but the mental mindset is my biggest worry with Lake Orion. Oxford, they lost a lot of talent, but they do have Jack Hendricks coming back. And then West Bloomfield, obviously, when you look at the Lakers, I had them getting in. But when you look at that league record, I just don't know if I can trust, I just don't. There's so many question marks with West Bloomfield, particularly up front. And if Jamal Shakespeare has to play quarterback, that could be a big problem. So when you look at the division, when you look at the teams, I think it's accurate. I know the polls, they have Clarkston projected, the coaches poll, they have Clarkston projected at 1, Lake Orion at 2, Adams at 3, Oxford at 4, West Bloomfield at 4, Oxford at 5. Let's not forget, last year Oxford was projected to finish 5th. They won a division last year. So, so anybody in this division can win the division. And I think, I think it's how tight this division's going to be. There's a reason why this division is known as the group of death or the kiss of death. So it's going to be a fun year. It'll be a really fun year, especially in this division known as the kiss of death, which is the OAA Red. So, all right, everybody, I'm going to sign off here. I wish everybody the best of luck this upcoming season throughout all 4 divisions, the red, the white, the blue, the gold, also along with Waterford Kettering and Waterford Mott. This is Sammy Taormina here. Sign off. Take care. God bless. And I will see you all next week, everybody. Take care and God bless and see you all soon. And good luck to everybody competing this upcoming season.